I've been walking through other people's kitchens for a long time now, and there's a moment that happens almost every time. Somebody shows me the feature they were proudest of when they finished their remodel, and then they pause and then they say, "But honestly." That pause is where this whole video lives, because the things that sell a kitchen remodel and the things that make a kitchen livable for the next 15 years are not always the same things, and nobody tells you that part until you've already signed the contract. I want to do something a little different this time. Instead of just listing trends, I want to walk you through what's actually happening in real homes right now, in 2026, based on what designers, contractors, and the people living with these choices are saying. Some of this might surprise you, because a few of these features were considered the gold standard not that long ago. If you've got one of these in your own kitchen, don't worry, I'll tell you how to live with it without tearing the whole room apart. And if you're still in the planning stage, this could save you a genuinely painful amount of money. While I get into the first one, go ahead and tap that subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps this channel keep finding the people who need it, and I'd love to hear in the comments which of these you've already run into. Let's start with something that's been showing up in design magazines for almost a decade: the fully open shelf wall, where most or all of your upper cabinets get swapped out for exposed shelving. I understand the appeal completely. It photographs beautifully. It makes a kitchen feel less boxed in. But here's the thing nobody mentions when they're styling those shelves for a magazine spread. Someone arranged every single item on them about 20 minutes before the photo was taken. That's not how real life works. Real life means cereal boxes, the kids' vitamins, a half-used bag of coffee, and whatever mug didn't make it back to the cabinet last night, all sitting in plain view, all day, every day. On top of that, kitchens produce a layer of fine grease and dust that settles on everything within reach of the stove. Open shelves need wiping down constantly, and so does everything sitting on them. The workaround that's gaining popularity with designers right now isn't abandoning the look entirely, it's using it sparingly. One narrow run of open shelving near a window for cookbooks or plants, paired with glass front cabinets elsewhere, gives you that lighter, more breathable feeling without turning your storage into a chore you have to perform daily. From there, let's talk about something that sounds incredibly clever in theory: dedicated microzones for every single activity in the kitchen, especially the coffee station. A few years back, designers were pushing homeowners to carve out a specific corner for everything: a baking zone, a coffee zone, a smoothie zone, each with its own gadgets permanently displayed and ready to go. It looked organized in renderings. In practice, once you've got 5 different stations each showing off their own equipment, the counters start to feel less like a kitchen and more like a small appliance showroom. The current thinking among designers has shifted hard toward fewer things on display and more things tucked behind doors, with maybe one functional zone kept visible, the one you genuinely use every single morning. If you've already built out multiple stations, you don't need to dismantle them. Just pick the one you actually rely on daily and start sliding everything else into a cabinet or an appliance garage. Suddenly, the counter breathes again, moving along to the appliance that swings out from the wall above your stove and looks like something pulled straight from a restaurant kitchen: the pot filler. It's a fun feature to show off, but think through what it's actually solving. Carrying a pot of cold water from the sink to the stove is not the hard part of cooking pasta. The hard part is carrying that same pot, now full and boiling, back across the kitchen to drain it. A pot filler does absolutely nothing about that half of the job. You're also running a water line up inside a wall that sits directly above your range, which means if that connection ever fails, you're dealing with water damage in one of the worst possible spots in your house. If you've already got one, it's not something to panic over. Just check the fitting occasionally and treat it as a nice bonus rather than a necessity. If you're still deciding whether to add one, that budget tends to go a lot further toward a better faucet, a deeper sink, or stronger ventilation. 3 things you'll genuinely use every day you cook. Here's a related one that builders love because it's cheap and efficient to install, but that designers have been quietly pushing back against: the microwave mounted directly above the range. It became the default in a lot of homes simply because it comes packaged with the stove and saves counter space. The problem is twofold. First, it puts a bulky, button-covered box directly in the visual center of the room, right where your eye naturally lands. Second, and more importantly, most of these combo units ventilate far worse than a dedicated range hood. That matters more than people realize, because weak ventilation means grease and odor linger in the air and slowly settle onto your cabinets, your walls, everything. A drawer microwave tucked into an island or a cabinet spot near your prep area frees up that visual real estate and lets you install a real range hood above the stove instead. If pulling the microwave out entirely isn't in the budget right now, I at minimum check whether yours vents to the outside or just recirculates air through a charcoal filter, because a lot of homeowners don't even realize theirs has been recirculating the whole time. Let's talk about color and finish for a minute, because this is where a lot of 2026 design conversations are happening. Dramatic, dark, high-gloss countertops with bold, sweeping veining have had a long run of popularity. Under showroom lighting, they look genuinely striking. At home, under your kitchen lights, every fingerprint, water spot, and smear shows up almost instantly, and a bold pattern can clash with your cabinets and flooring all at once instead of working with them. There's also an odd side effect. Busy patterns hide crumbs and mess so well that the counter never quite looks finished, no matter how recently you wiped it. Interior designer Emily Carlin has talked about how the industry is shifting away from stark, high-contrast palettes toward warmer, more saturated, more forgiving tones, things like terracotta, deep reds, and richer earth colors that don't demand constant upkeep to look intentional. If your countertops already lean dark and dramatic, you don't need to replace the slab. Lightening your backsplash and warming up the wall color nearby takes a surprising amount of visual weight off those counters without spending a dime on the stone itself. While we're on the topic of color, it's worth pausing on the all-white kitchen, because this one has had the longest run of any trend in recent memory and is now facing the steepest pushback. Crisp white cabinets, pale gray counters, black accents for contrast. It's a combination that photographs beautifully in daylight. But several designers, including Tom Wicksteed, have pointed out that gray and stark white finishes tend to read as clinical rather than calm, especially once the sun goes down and your kitchen lighting takes over. The room that felt fresh at 9 a.m. can feel cold and a little sterile by 9 p.m. High-contrast color schemes also tend to be popular targets for homeowner fatigue heading into 2026, partly because they show every smudge and scuff more visibly than a softer palette would. The fix isn't necessarily abandoning white. It's choosing a warmer version of it, creamy off-whites, natural wood tones mixed in on an island or open shelf. And if you're not ready to touch a single cabinet, just swapping your light bulbs for a warmer color temperature can shift the whole mood of the room in an afternoon. Now we're getting into the three that come up most often when I talk to people who've actually lived with their remodel for a year or two. The ones that are expensive enough to fix that you really want to get them right the first time. Let's start with the double island. On paper, having two islands sounds like the ultimate kitchen upgrade, more prep space, more seating, more storage, room for several people to cook at once without bumping elbows. In a lot of real kitchens, though, two islands eat into your walking space so much that moving around the room with another person becomes genuinely awkward. The general guideline contractors use is somewhere between 42 and 48 inches of clearance between any two surfaces, and two islands often can't maintain that all the way around the room. What tends to happen is one island becomes mostly seating, while the other slowly turns into a landing pad for mail, keys, and whatever else needs a temporary home. You end up with a lot of flat surface area, but not necessarily the kind of deep, functional storage that actually makes a kitchen work. One well-planned island with real drawer storage, a built-in spot for trash and recycling, and maybe a small seating overhang, almost always outperforms two islands trying to juggle every job at once. Whatever square footage you save by going with a single island is worth putting toward a proper pantry instead. Next on that short list is something that almost never gets enough attention during planning: ventilation. It's treated like an afterthought because, frankly, it doesn't announce itself as a problem until you've been cooking in the space for months. People spend their energy choosing cabinet finishes and counter colors, and the range hood becomes whatever came standard with the package. Then 6 months in, you notice cooking smells lingering for hours after dinner, a faint film of grease building up on cabinet faces, and windows fogging up every time you boil water. A properly sized range hood, vented to the outside rather than just recirculating air through a filter, makes a difference that's hard to overstate once you've experienced both. A common shortcut contractors use is dividing your kitchen's total volume by 4 to estimate a minimum CFM, though another widely used rule of thumb suggests aiming for roughly 100 CFM for every 12 inches of stove width. Island range hoods generally need meaningfully more power than wall-mounted ones, since there's no wall behind them helping to contain the airflow. If the math feels like a lot, just ask whoever's selling you the hood for a recommendation based on your specific cooktop and kitchen size. That's a completely reasonable question, and any good supplier will walk you through it. If you're stuck with a recirculating hood for now, staying on top of filter changes and wiping nearby surfaces regularly will slow the buildup considerably, but if you're designing from scratch, this is genuinely one spot where going slightly bigger than you think you need almost always pays off. You can run a strong hood on a lower setting. You can't make a weak one stronger after the fact. And that brings us to the one that consistently turns out to be the most expensive regret of all, the one people don't see coming until they're actually living in the space, not having enough storage in the right places. It sounds almost too obvious to mention, which is exactly why it catches people off guard. A kitchen layout on paper or in a showroom display always looks like it has a home for everything. Appliances are hidden away, counters are bare, cabinets look generous. Then you move in, and the real questions start showing up. Where do the pots and pans actually live? What about cutting boards? The small appliances you use a few times a week? The dry goods? The cleaning supplies that pile up under every sink in every home ever built? When there isn't a planned spot for these things, they end up on the counter, and once the counter is covered, the whole kitchen starts to feel chaotic, no matter how nice the cabinets or countertops are. I've walked through kitchens with beautiful natural stone and custom cabinetry where this exact thing happened. Gorgeous finishes, completely overwhelmed storage. Open floor plans tend to make this worse, since stretching sightlines often means sacrificing upper cabinets or a pantry wall to keep that open, airy feeling. The room looks stunning on move-in day and runs out of space within a month. If you're planning ahead, prioritize deep drawers over lower cabinets with shelves, since drawers let you see and reach everything without crouching and digging blindly toward the back. A real pantry, even a narrow one, built-in pullouts for trash and recycling so they're not just sitting exposed on the floor, and a dedicated appliance garage for the things you use constantly but don't necessarily want on permanent display. These are the details that quietly make or break how a kitchen feels to live in. If you're already past the renovation stage and storage came up short, a freestanding pantry cabinet tucked into an awkward corner or a simple set of shelves with doors can recover a surprising amount of ground without a full remodel. If you take away one thing from everything I've walked through here, let it be this: plan your storage before you fall in love with your finishes. The order really does matter more than most people expect going in. None of the features on this list are disasters if you already have them. Most have a workable fix that doesn't involve tearing the room down to the studs. If you've got one of these in your own kitchen, I'd genuinely like to know which one in the comments, and if there's a kitchen decision you're still wrestling with for an upcoming remodel, drop that too. It might end up being the next video. Thanks for sticking with me through this one, and I'll catch you in the next video.